Hey viewers, my name's Kara. I'm your host for Tuesdays here on the Pagan Perspective. This is the last regular weekly hosts week of August. The next 2 weeks will be subs weeks because this month is the collab's anniversary. Happy 10th birthday to the Pagan Perspective. This week's topic for the regular weekly hosts, or whatever you want to call us, we've started saying full-time hosts and substitute hosts as well. The regular weekly hosts this week, we are doing our own choose your own adventure, choosing from any of the subs week topics that the subs have answered so far in 2019. Some of the topics are things that we all have covered because they were both a full-time hosts topic and a subs hosts topic. So I think 3 of them were already covered, so that narrows down our pool a little bit, but we can also combine. So I want to talk briefly about 2 of the different topics that the subs covered this year, both of which I have definitely talked about before throughout the 10 years on this channel, but maybe not as recently as I feel like. A lot of topics I feel like, oh, I just did that within the past year, and it was actually 5 years ago. So I will revisit some of these, even though I feel like this first one, I really don't have much new to say about. And so the first one I wanted to touch on is the ever popular question of music, our favorite pagan or pagan-like musicians, artists, songs, things like that. The ones that I always name, some pagan artists who I love. Definitely the top 2 that I always have to mention are S.J. Tucker and Kellyanna. I love them both. I've met them both in person, so I love them as people, as well as I really enjoy all of their music that I've heard so far. And pretty much anytime they come out with anything new, I love it. I love and appreciate it. I'm absolutely in love with all of S.J.'s music, and Kellyanna also has so much cool, like, thematic stuff. You know, like I went to visit the Serpent Mound last year, and Kellyanna has a song about the Serpent Mound. So things like that are just very, like, obviously relevant to certain things that work very well for ritual. Both of them have that quality about them. So not just songs that I love listening to and singing along with throughout my day-to-day life, but also things that I've actually used in ritual before that I feel like bring a lot of power and energy to those things. I also really like what I have heard so far of Ginger Doss, although I have only heard one full album, the From Love to Love album. I have a copy of that someone actually gave me as a gift, so I love that. And other than that, I mean, there are some sort of specific songs that I really listened to as a teenager when I was sort of starting my path, and I was specifically looking online for pagan music because I feel like that's something that we all do. We're like, we want more pagan music. So I found bands like Blackmore's Night, who I really enjoy. I also have not heard their entire discography, but what I have heard of theirs I really love. My favorite songs by them that I've been listening to since I was probably like 12 years old or somewhere around there are Under a Violet Moon and Fires at Midnight. Those are definitely my favorite Blackmore's Night songs. Enya, I love Enya. I've always loved Enya. I know that's kind of a joke to some people, like Enya is almost a stereotype in and of herself as far as her music goes and like the type of people who tend to listen to it. I love Enya. Come at me, you know, like I love it. Emerald Rose is another one that I have not heard all of their music, but I love what I've heard so far. And I feel like most people, like me, the first song of theirs that I heard, if you've heard any song by them, it's probably Santa Claus is Pagan Too, which is a really fun winter solstice song about the symbolism of Santa Claus and how Santa Claus is pagan too. So that's by Emerald Rose. And then beyond that, there are other like bands, artists whose music is very energetically relevant, I guess you could say, to my path and my practice. I don't not all of them are pagan, but some of them may or may not be. I don't know. I don't know all of the members of the bands individually, but the kind of things that my partner and I really listen to a lot of is a lot of like jam bands, and so people that we've gone to see at music festivals and things like that, and some of them sing and write music about very relevant topics about social justice, activism, environmentalism, energy, and love. And some of that sounds like hippy dippy bullshit, but I wear that with pride. So some of the bands that we really love, my partner's favorite band ever, who I also really enjoy, is called Pigeons Playing Ping Pong. We listen to them quite a bit. They're not a pagan band by any means, but just good energy. Also, Twiddle. Beats Antique is a fantastic band who we've seen live a couple of times. They tour around here, and their music is very and their performances are very much like ritual theater to me. So Beats Antique I love. And then there are bands and music that sort of fit my worldview again, but is not necessarily pagan, such as the Beatles. So I'm wearing my Beatles shirt today. And the soundtrack to Hair, the American tribal love rock musical, Hair. I love it. It's all a bunch of hippie shit, and I love it. I was in a production of Hair, so it has a very special place in my heart for that as well. I've also seen it live on Broadway, not in Cleveland, but I actually traveled to Pittsburgh years ago to see it when it was touring there. And then besides that, there's, a lot of just chants and things that I love that I use in my practice. Music is a big thing that I use in my practice, and it might just be simple chants that they're not necessarily attributed to a specific artist, or you might know who wrote it and who brought it to the community, but it's not like a band going around doing them. So there's a lot of chants and songs that are written by people within the reclaiming tradition, and that are in some of those books, like in this Circle Round, Raising Children in Goddess Traditions. There's a lot of songs in that book. I also personally like a lot of the songs that are in the UU songbook, the Unitarian Universalist songbook that is used in those services. It's called Singing the Living Tradition. That's the first one. And then there's a second one that's kind of like an addendum, but I don't remember the title of that one off the top of my head. We usually call them the blue book and the teal book. But the first one is called Singing the Living Tradition, and I have my own copy of that because I still speak at UU churches from time to time, and I used to be part of a worship arts committee where I actually helped design some services that were pagan themed or around Sabbats or other holidays or things like that. So I have my own copy of that, and I really do like some of the songs in there. Some of them are specifically earth-based spirituality songs that have been added to this very diverse group of songs, but there are also ones in there that were not necessarily intended to be earth-based or pagan in nature, but that very much speak to that for me. So that's pretty much what I have to say about music. And then the other topic that I wanted to touch on is someone had asked about how we go about introducing the fact of our religion or our path to different people that we meet. And then they specifically asked, what about people that you're dating, and how do you approach the topic with children? So we've talked about pagan parenting type stuff earlier this year. I think it was earlier this year. It might have been last year. Like I said, I think that a lot of the topics that I do have been much more recent than they actually are. So I don't have really a good concept of how long ago that actually was. I think it was this year though, because I remember sitting on the porch talking about it. But I am not a parent, so I always approach those types of topics differently. And I talked in that video about how I approach sort of the themes and ideas of my path and practice with children on a regular basis, when I work with children, because concepts of magic and energy and growing things and respect for living things and stuff like that, those are pretty universal concepts and children understand them. I don't typically go up to children that I meet and am like, hey, I'm a witch. The only time I really think something like that has ever happened is if I'm around children who are talking about witchcraft and they're talking about how they themselves are studying it and learning about it, and then I might bring up that subject. Typically, though, when I interact with children, it's in a working capacity, that I'm working with them in theater or something like that. And so if it's not directly part of the show that we're working on, I don't talk about that with them, just because you have to deal with parents, and it's hard enough working with kids in the theater, dealing with their parents, let alone if I'm trying to tell them that I'm a witch or something, right? So I have not really come across the situation in my life where I have had to approach the subject of my beliefs with a child, because I don't have any of my own, and I feel like any of my friends who know my path and I know their children, they have been the ones to talk to their kids about what that means, and I don't know if it's something that they share with them or not, or if they tell them about it in their own way. Young kids in my own family have no idea, mostly just because my extended family themselves don't really know or don't really care or are not the biggest fan of it, and we don't talk about it. So of course I wouldn't be talking about it like with their children. Sorry for the noise that's happening in the background now. This always happens. Every time I try to go do a video, it's been quiet outside and then people start making noise when I start recording. But anyway, yeah, so if I were to approach the subject with children, it would basically be in the same way that I approach the subject with people of any age who I am just kind of wary of whether or not they will be receptive in a positive way. And so I tend to just bring up general ideas, my beliefs, my general worldview type of thing, you might say. I don't necessarily start with, I'm a witch, because I know that a lot of people have false conceptions and misconceptions of what that means. And so if you start with something that they might immediately misunderstand and close off, there's no opportunity to talk about anything else. Whereas if you talk about the beliefs first and then tell them, this is what I call witchcraft, or like, this is what we refer to when we say witchcraft, I find that that is a lot more effective when people actually get to know what something means to you before you put the label on it that might mean something very different to them. So like, that's how I approached it with my own mother, and that worked fairly well. Other people do find out that I identify as pagan or a witch first, and it just depends on, do they seem receptive to that? They want to know more about it? Are they curious to know more? Or do they just want to pray for my soul? And, you know, I don't waste my time anymore with people who are not willing to have conversations and learn things. So that's just how that goes. And then, like, with dating, I'm not doing much of that anymore. But whenever I have, or whenever I do meet someone with whom that sort of relationship might blossom, I personally always like to cultivate some sort of friendship with a person beforehand, and typically throughout that friendship they would learn about my beliefs and things, and so they would already know that sort of thing before anything dating wise might come up. If it's someone that I meet and on the fly becomes sort of a let's go out on a date type of thing, I don't think that's ever happened in my life, because that's not the way I like to do things. But if it did, I always like to make sure people know where I'm coming from before anything like that gets going. So I would bring it up right away. That's just how I am at this point. But I've been doing this for a long time. I'm, more than 10 years down the line. I'm 10 years down the line of doing this on the internet. So dealing with ways that a lot of different people have reacted to things, I've just decided on the methods that work the best for me, the way that I am going to decide which situations are worth taking a little more effort and broaching the subject slowly, and in what situations do I just want to say, hey, right here, right up front, this is something you need to know, and I need to know your basic feelings about before any kind of relationship can continue from here, whether that be a friendship or a business partnership or a romantic relationship, whatever kind of relationship it is. I need you to know this right now, because if you're not cool with this, if you're not cool with who I am as a person, I don't really want to like take my time trying to get to know someone who ultimately thinks really horribly of me, or like just wants to save me rather than get to know what I'm really about or whatever. So yeah, that's kind of how those things work for me. A little bit of a shorter video for you this week. Try to put those in every now and again. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks for sticking around, whether you've been here for 10 years or 5 years or 10 months or 10 minutes. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting us in all the ways that you do. You can let everyone else know your thoughts about the topics that any of us have covered in the comments or whatever you like. And I'll see you next time. I will see you in September. The next 2 weeks are subs weeks to celebrate the anniversary. Give the subs a little bit more airtime, if you will. So I'll see you in September. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye.